Great, here we go. You ready? Hello again. It's great to see you all getting involved in what the platform has to offer, and good to see so many familiar faces from this morning's sessions. Thanks for staying with us. Tackling fraud and human error is our fourth and final panel of the day. Remote and hybrid working was essential for many people in 2019 and 2020 to keep us all safe and healthy, and it led to a massive increase in email communication and use of collaborative services to keep services running for the public. Unfortunately, this approach has increased opportunities for fraud and human error. According to an analysis of data from the UK's Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, 90% of cyber data breaches were caused by human error in 2019, suggesting that since the global pandemic, these figures could be even higher. Therefore, public sector organisations increasing pressure to minimise the risk of human error data breaches, with phishing dominating the UK cyber threat landscape, accounting for 45% of reports to the ICO. This panel will cover how public sector organisations can address cyber risk due to fraud and human error and share insight into lessons learned from data breach experiences. So here to discuss this with me are the brilliantly suited panel: Joshua Reddaway, Director for Fraud and Error Value for Money at the National Audit Office; Cliff Dean, CIO, North Kesteven and West Lindsey District Councils; Iain Harrison, Information Governance and Risk Manager for Leicester City Council; and we say a very good morning to Dave Baggett, CEO and founder of Inky, because Dave's joining us from Washington, DC. So remember, this is your last opportunity to ask any questions you may have of our panelists and help me make this a full conversation. So don't be shy. Please use our live Q&A function, which you'll find at the right-hand side of your screen. So hello to everybody. Joshua, I'd like to start with you, if I may. You led me to a recent blog post entitled "A Small Leak Will Sink a Big Ship." Never a truer word spoken, I'd say.
Yes. I mean, so our role very much is to look at how government is dealing with all of this. And over the last year, we've seen a massive increase in fraud across the public sector. And, you know, if you put that into context, it's, you know, the government has spent more than £370 billion in additional on the pandemic. So, and so a lot of that was set up very, very quickly. And a lot of it was set up very much in an emergency situation, giving money to support businesses, to support people that the government didn't have a relationship with before. And identity is always a big issue on this. So it's not really a surprise we've seen as kind of like a small leaks, but these small leaks are actually quite big leaks of value. So far, just in the audited accounts, we're talking £15.7 billion of fraud that we've seen in the last year. That's in 2020, 2021. That's across universal credit in welfare, 3.85 in HMRC, on things like the furlough scheme, on the Eat Out to Help Out, on the SAYS. Really, the furlough scheme is the main part, but 5.8 billion on that. And on the BAYS schemes, particularly the business loan schemes and various things, 5 billion in fraud and error in there. We're still in the midst of other audits, so we're looking at the health sector, we're looking at the local government sector, and I expect there will be other large numbers that will come out.
And Joshua, just briefly, do you think these figures are just likely to get bigger, given our dependence now, and you know, and how quickly digital transformations had to take place?
So, to a certain extent, these pandemic schemes have been particularly vulnerable. They were one-offs. I don't think that, for example, the benefit system is not going to fall that rapidly on this. But I think the general thrust of your question is, you know, yes, we've seen a particular, I'm afraid, bumpy year for fraudsters, but the general drift towards of fraud and error being a problem in public services, no, that is something that is here to stay. We're talking, you know, the general, just before the pandemic, the government's estimate was between 30 to 50 billion of loss to the taxpayer for fraud and error, and that's a very wide estimate, and it kind of tells you how much is actually known. But of course, fraud is very difficult to estimate. And yes, the sorts of things that we're seeing much more commonly in looking at this are on the cyber side and on the kind of digital attacks, as well as, frankly, opportunistic, just individuals knowing that they can do something, getting away with doing something.
These, Dave, are telephone book numbers, aren't they? I mean, the losses in the billions. I think it's very difficult sometimes for us to get our head around those kinds of figures. Are those the sort of figures that you're looking at when you're looking at what's going on with cybercrime?
So, and I'm not just talking cybercrime, I'm talking all sorts, but more often, well, quite often these days, these things are actually done online because you make an application and therefore it's automatically cybercrime. Yes, we're talking very large numbers indeed. I mean, I think when these kind of like reporting these to Parliament and the way that the MPs were thinking about it, they'd just been asked to go through the lobby to vote for a tax rise to support big social things, or social care and so on. We're talking about amounts of money that, if the taxpayer wasn't losing it, would help solve some of our biggest problems in society.
Yeah. Dave, do you want to pick up on that before I ask you? I'd like to
Sure.
dive a bit deeper into phishing so with a PH, but do you want to pick up on what Joshua said first? You're nodding away
Yes,
there.
certainly. I mean, we're seeing very similar numbers in the US, just absolutely massive losses to both public sector and private sector companies. And one of the things that I often point out is that everyone talks about ransomware as well, and ransomware is usually attached to a phishing email. So we're seeing the direct losses from things like wire fraud, fake invoices, that's sort of the losses that are typically attributed to phishing specifically. But then we also look at the ancillary losses from all this ransomware. And ransomware is so successful now that we're seeing companies offering ransomware as a service, where you can go on the dark web and get someone to ransomware for you, and you just get the money and they get a cut. I mean, so it's becoming industrialized. It's a real scourge, and this is, I think, if you look at things like the Verizon report that they put out every year, phishing's the number one problem right now. It's the number one vector. It's the number one reason why people and companies get breached.
Can you talk to us in a bit more detail about phishing? I mean, Fish Fence is your flagship product, but what exactly is phishing and how big a problem is it in cybersecurity today?
Yeah, this is one of the things that cybersecurity professionals always use all these terms and assume everyone knows what this stuff means, and it's worth taking a step back and defining terms. So usually phishing is some kind of impersonation. So in the case of email phishing, which is what we work on, it's an email that appears to be from a brand that say Microsoft or HSBC, and you probably can recognize maybe 500 to 1,000 brands as a person, lots of international brands. So it's either a brand impersonating a brand or impersonating an individual And one of the insights that we had 5 years ago when we started working on this problem is we needed to develop tools to recognize forgery, right? To detect that someone's impersonating, because the traditional way that people evaluated good versus bad mail wasn't tuned to that. It was more tuned to spam. Does this content look bad? Does it have lots of dollar signs or things like that in it? Is it asking you to pay an advanced fee scam? Phishing is really about this sort of forgery element, impersonation. And so what we did 5 years ago is embarked on a research program to develop tools to identify, hey, that looks like a brand the person's going to recognize, but it's actually not from that brand. Or this looks like a person who's mailed this person before, but it's not something that person would normally say. So we can alert the end user, hey, this is maybe not who you think it is.
Yeah, they're difficult to spot, though. They're so sophisticated these days. I like to think I'm quite aware, but I've nearly been caught out with some sometimes because they are so sophisticated. Iain, you're joining us and representing Leicester City Council on our debate. Have you had issues with phishing at Leicester City Council, or indeed any experience of ransomware attacks?
Ransomware attacks, nothing that's had any effect. Yeah, our security has been fairly tight on these matters. Phishing attacks we get quite regularly, almost daily. I'm getting queries from colleagues in departments about stuff they've received and not opened, or Email is a wonderful business tool, but it's in an organisation of 6,000 plus people all accessing it and dealing with a variety of sources every day. It's a perennial problem. We do what we can to educate people, and we run little test exercises ourselves with our IT colleagues on a regular basis to see if people click on links and what they will follow through. But yeah, it's a constant presence that we're aware of.
And Iain, what are some of the aspects of data protection and information governance that you and your colleagues handling at your council?
My team, the team I manage, is the information governance and risk team. So we cover everything from the day-to-day advice, guidance and compliance aspects. We investigate incidents. We do audits and a wide variety of other things and a number of other exercises. So it certainly keeps us busy, and security is a growing area. We've seen a large increase in incidents over the past couple of years, and I think with the pandemic it was multiplied somewhat by the distance working aspect and various other things that impacted as well. But yeah, no, it's cyber person. I spend most of my time advising people on the more mundane aspects of data protection and the day-to-day thing, but it's increasingly taking over large parts of my life, so I have a considerable interest in this.
I would imagine. And Cliff, last but certainly not least, I mean, we often hear, don't we, about local authorities referring to staff shortages or lack of appropriate skills in terms of managing cybersecurity. We were talking this morning about its training are the three things that are really important to help protect us. But how have you managed to address this at North Kesteven and West Lindsey councils, and what tips might you be able to share, learnings might you be able to share with other authorities perhaps facing similar challenges to you face?
Yeah, so we've been really active with our WARPs, the Warning Advisory Reporting Points. We've fully engaged with the training that's being cascaded down from the Local Government Association and the Cyber Tactical Advisory Group. And what we've done is we've used that to change the not only the direction of the training, so it's not just once a year for 1 hour, everybody's compliant, so that we have continual training, and it's been based for both colleagues across the whole organisations and for the technical staff. So technical staff have used the effectively the skills that are out there that the criminals are using against us to enhance their protection. We've also actively used the publicly available assessment of what everybody's email hygiene is like for all local authorities. So we know how good we are compared to all the other authorities. And so we use that on as an assessment to how trustworthy items are that we're getting from those people. So when we receive an email, we've got an understanding of what the trustworthiness is of that organization that's sending it. We're also we've used a position where, unfortunately, because the criminals are good, we can't trust people's judgments. So we've fully deployed an active cyber defense mechanism where when they click on a bad link, it doesn't resolve, and doesn't take them to the naughty site.
Yeah, we heard this morning very eloquently from the leader of Redcar and Cleveland Council about a ransomware attack that they'd had on the council that cost them 10 million. And Mary explained it very eloquently this morning, Joshua. But does government, do you think, fully understand the public sector's exposure to cyber fraud and error?
So, I mean, funnily enough, central government administers some really large amounts of money and some really large, large organisations, and they are under constant attack from cyber, probing their systems and assessing them. It's not something that it's easy to put a number on exactly how large or so on that is. But I think, what we're looking for when we talk to essentially our government clients, as an audit firm, what would you expect, is what is their approach to this? Do they have a structured approach? Do they understand what the risks are? And do they assess those risks? Do they measure those risks? And do they take action against those risks? And it really is a bit of an arms race on this, that government needs to adapt and evolve its systems as quickly as the people that are attacking it do. And that's why we always say that it's not really about can you stop fraud and error. It's about can you show that the controls you have in place are cost effective, that you are doing everything that is reasonably possible to stop this, and are you doing that cycle of risk assessment, measurement, evaluation, continuously improving your controls fast enough that it is commensurate with the threats you're facing to bring that level of fraud down. The only other thing I'd kind of say to that is that in any large area of spend that you have, be it a benefit stream, so local authority housing benefits or procurement or whatever it is, there's going to be some problems. The question is, do you know what they are? And have you assessed that risk? So it's, if you are in a situation where you're going, I'm quite happy that there is no fraud in the spend of my organisation, but you haven't really looked, then I'm afraid you probably got a surprise coming.
Dave, do you want to add to that?
It's the same with phishing. I mean, if you think you don't have a phishing problem, you just don't know you have a phishing problem. Honestly, and actually, one of the things that we found is we'll have companies tell us, well, we're too small to be targeted by phishers. We're not important. And one thing that we've observed is it doesn't matter who you are, how big you are, what your sector is. The attackers are now going onto sites like LinkedIn and running bots that scrape LinkedIn to figure out who is the manager of a person, to then send the person a mail appearing to be from their manager. So they're essentially scraping org chart information off of LinkedIn and targeting everybody robotically. So, absolutely everyone is targeted. So if you don't know you have a problem, it's just that you don't know it. You do have a problem.
And
the other thing
sorry, carry on.
I was going to add to, something Cliff said, training's really important. And we talk about human error. The way we're thinking about this now at Inky is you've probably seen that email systems put this little note at the top of the mail saying, hey, this is an external mail, be careful. We like that idea, but what we're doing at Inky is we're evolving that into a much more sophisticated capability that essentially turns every real email the person gets into a potential training example. So instead of just training people on synthetic phishing examples, we're giving them guidance on the real mail they receive. And the analogy I like to use is self-driving cars. You would think about, self-driving cars is one of the holy grails of artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. You can't just fall asleep while your car drives itself. But the AI is still useful because it will keep you in the lane and protect you, provide more safety. We're kind of thinking about the AI now as not just a tool to just block bad stuff, but also to give users more information to help them evaluate the potential risk of a mail and reduce that likelihood of an error. So think about the case where you get a mail that appears to be from someone you know. It's from her real account. It's a vendor you normally interact with, and she says, pay this invoice. Well, Inky might say, that doesn't really seem to be her. Normally she mails from the UK, and this mail came from Kazakhstan. That's weird. We're not sure it's not her, but that certainly is unusual. So you can see the AI that can analyze the mail can actually give the user more information. That's almost like a just-in-time training. So we're really thinking about hybridizing and coming up with a combination of pure protection and pure training and sort of ending up in the middle.
Cliff and Iain, I'm just wondering from your sort of council perspectives, whether you have any questions you'd like to ask Dave about phishing or anything that you've experienced at work that might be useful to run past Dave?
Yeah, I suppose,
we uncovered an instance. Oh, sorry, Karen.
No, you go.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No,
I was going to say, we recently encountered an issue which I think about the LinkedIn scraping, as we had a number of instances where mid-level staff were receiving emails apparently from their directors or others asking them to do certain things, and a pattern started to emerge, and we looked, and the conclusion we came to was that that's probably what had happened. And we did some awareness around that with people about raising, if you get a random email from what appears to be your director, who appears to be out of the office, asking you to do something which generally involves the expenditure of money in some way, think again. Plan a few exercises around that, but it is something we're aware of, and it's something that we've certainly seen occurring in our environment. But no, that was just an interesting one. Was keen to follow up on these things.
Cliff, what were you going to add?
I think, probably one of the biggest threat vectors for us is literally other organisations, because if they've got their DKIM, their DMARC, their SPF record set up correctly, and they may not yet be in a position where they are running MTA, STS, or other advanced technologies, if they're compromised, their mail is still going to come through and be delivered to all of my colleagues, because it will have come from a genuine source. It will have something horrible within it, and it's going to get delivered at the end of the day. And if I
just going to add to that, we see this all the time. We talk about protecting yourself from others, because you can protect your own employees, for example, from their accounts getting taken over. You can do what's called multi-factor authentication. So you're not protecting the account merely with a password, but also with the confirmation on their phone. But what about all the third parties that you interact with? They don't all do multi-factor authentication. So you're vulnerable when somebody you interact with, their account is compromised. So a lot of what we talk about at Inky is account takeover is mostly a problem with others, not you yourself. For you yourself, you should protect your own accounts by doing multi-factor auth and just prevent the accounts from getting taken over. What Inky needs to detect is when somebody else who doesn't have great security, when their account gets taken over, and as Cliff said, is then used to send to your employee a request to like buy gift cards, for example. We see that scam all the time. It's a surreptitious way to steal money. Indirectly. It's not direct wire fraud, but it's like, go buy Apple gift cards and tell me the numbers for a marketing giveaway. Apple gift cards are worth face value on the dark web. It's just stealing money. It's just an indirect way to steal money. So absolutely, Cliff's 100% spot on. I mean, the vulnerability is others, even if you yourself have an excellent security policy in place.
Yeah. Joshua, how can organizations then effectively manage their exposure to fraud and human error?
I think the one bit of advice I would have is whether or not you are a senior manager yourself or whether or not you're supporting senior managers on this is to not get too scared by how technical it is when you're trying to describe it. Organizations need technical advice and so on, but what they mostly need is structured, systematic approaches to dealing with it, and they need good management. That's why I was trying to describe that kind of like what we call the fraud and error cycle, where you assess the risk, you design controls against those risks, you measure whether or not they're working, and you evaluate, and you do that over and over again. So one of the things we've done is published questions for audit committees and senior managers to ask of their organisation, and they're pretty basic questions, but they can be incredibly powerful about what is the systematic approach that organisation is taking. And I think it is possible to be responsible for an organisation and ensure that it has good cybersecurity policy without being a cybersecurity professional yourself. I'm not saying don't get those involved. Please do in the right place. But the power of a kind of basic question about what the approach of the organisation is. Does it have a systematic approach? Is it logging what the threats are? Is it measuring the text that it's getting? Has it got the training and support in place? All of these things, that's what leads to a secure environment.
Cliff, you've clearly had a success story in terms of the partnership between your authorities. What would you say are the key takeaways from this, and how do you feel that partnership has benefited business outcomes as well as improving cyber posture?
Yeah, we've used some of the processes and procedures that are available in central gov. So we've actually worked with Her Majesty's Customs and Excise on transactional analysis. So when people put an address into our benefits system in order to process a claim or start a claim, we check with Customs and Excise to see whether that's a known address that's linked with fraud. We do the same or at a device level, so whether a fraudster is using the same laptop or in multiple attacks, or we're checking not only the spatial address, the physical address, but the actual device that's being used. We're also checking on the fly against the information that central government holds for known bank accounts that are linked to fraud, and we're getting back a risk rating so that we can then decide to do a little bit more checking internally, and we can provide feedback securely back to Customs and Excise on what we find and how we progress on those matters. So
is that time consuming, Cliff? Does that take a lot of time to do all that checking?
It's on the fly. It's automated.
It's just automated.
API calls out to the tool set that's run by Customs and Excise.
Yeah. Excellent. Iain, how important is collaboration between different stakeholders in ensuring data security procedures are successful? Key stakeholders have a key role to play in this, don't they?
We have a corporate information governance board which encompasses all our corporate stakeholders from IT and from communications and other parts of the organisation, which we meet every couple of months or sooner, depending on the circumstances, to raise issues of this kind. And we have a lot of IT security input, which has been quite useful when we've been rolling out particular types of training and raising particular awareness through various outlets we have of issues that we become aware of. We also have a wider Leicestershire and Rutland group that we chair, which performs a similar function across organisations. So we can use that as a forum to share good practice and to cascade ideas and potential options to follow and to talk about common threats. We've all recently, many people in local government and probably other organisations have received various letters from people purporting to have discovered major problems with the cookies we use on our websites, and offering to receive a flat fee in return for taking no further action against us. And that's something we've cascaded across various member organisations to work up a joint approach to dealing with certain things. So it's pretty important to get people together because everybody's suffering from the same problem, and the point that people have made about other people's IT being taken over or hijacked is something we've encountered from some of our partner organisations as well. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
And of course, it's not just learning. It's not just learnings from other councils and other organisations in Britain. It's learnings from other countries as well, Dave, isn't it? With your Washington DC hat on today.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolutely universal global problem, and we have customers all around the world, and we've actually, I mentioned we have this guidance in the mail. We've actually translated it into 35 different languages because this is not a problem that's limited to the UK or the US. It's absolutely global. So 100%, and just to give people a sense of why is this phishing and ransomware stuff so common now? It's easy. It's really easy and cheap. I mean, think about the fact that email is such an old system. It dates back to 1971. It predates a lot of the modern notions of security and authentication. Cliff mentioned DKIM and SPF and these standards. Those were kind of retrofitted onto email after the fact. But the fact remains still, anyone on the internet can set up a mail server and send mail purporting to be the Queen of England. And that's, people don't really realize that. You can set up a new mail server, register some domain, and it's cheap. You can go, in fact, you can register a name on Namecheap with Bitcoin anonymously, and it can be completely plausible. And you can send mail and put whatever you want in the from line. So it's easy, it's cheap, it's effective, and that's why it's such a scourge. And this is why, you know, we're trying to both block more of this stuff using AI, but also help users evaluate, is that really the Queen of England mailing me? Probably it's not her, right?
No, probably not. We are just towards the end. Joshua, I'd like to give you the final thought, not only of today's panel, but also of today's event. Do you have any guidance? You know, does the NAO have any guidance that you can point our audience to help them?
Well, there are two things that I would like people to look at. One is we have a good practice guide on fraud and error, and that shows both our audit approach, but what we suggest all organisations do in terms of that structured approach I talked about of identifying the risk, designing controls, measuring, evaluating. I'm going to say that over and over again because it's so important. Measure what is going on. The other one is on cyber. So we have published a good practice guide on cyber. These are all available on the NEA website, and that's the one that sets out those basic questions that I talked about. Really for senior managers. So if you are a senior manager user, if you are supporting senior managers, give it to them and say, these are the questions you should be asking me in my role. Do we have a structured approach for dealing with this? Because you know, this is all a bit scary. There is quite a lot of money at stake here, but it's by taking a systematic approach that I think that we can actually deal with this and keep public services running, which is what we're all about.
Joshua, you rose to that challenge nicely. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of my panelists for an in-depth and insightful conversation there. And thank you to you for taking part today. We've had some great debates throughout the day, so much appreciated. With that, we draw to a close on what has been a fantastic day of guests and delegates networking across our PSE365 platform. We've covered a breadth of challenges, of opportunities and solutions as we've engaged with the topic of cyber security, fraud and human error. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers and panelists who have taken their time out today to share their expertise, their insights and some of the things that have happened to them. As mentioned throughout, all of today's content will be available to view on demand within the platform at your leisure within the next 24 to 48 hours. And do remember, our networking tools remain open year-round with an ever-growing community of registered innovators, and that includes you. I look forward to seeing many of you back again for our event on learning and development on the 3rd of February. So please share the word with your colleagues. We enjoy welcoming new faces to the platform. If you're a winner in our gamification challenge, then the PSE team will be in touch to discuss your prize options. Separate to gamification, today's event, you remember, was CPD certified with 1 CPD point earned for every hour of live content watched. So if you'd like your CPD certificate, then please email marketing@cognitivepublishing.com. Before we go, I'd like to extend a special thank you to our events team behind the scenes at Public Health Executive, who I think have been dressed in quite a festive manner today, who have helped put this event together. They work really hard on it. And from me and everyone at PSE 365, thank you for attending and giving us your time and your attention. Have a great rest of your evening. I'll see you again, hopefully, at our next event. So goodbye for now.